program. But again, I just wanted to share with you this data to show that indeed these programs are working. We're excited because we have a lot of districts in our county, and yet they're very cooperative in providing the data and showing that there is improvement among all of our various students within the county. But so thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from anyone?
I'll just make a quick comment because I think that I want to make sure that we're addressing the issue here. This isn't about trying to take more money away from schools. That's not the point. It's about spending our money in the most effective manner to get the best result. So there's no need really to have a discussion that would even imply that, this is going to be some huge cost savings in terms of general fund or Prop 98 money. It's about, is this being used in the best possible way? If we've got this process, all the paperwork, it's going into a lot of administrative work that, maybe it should be in home visits or whatever. That's really, I think, what we want to look at. And like the value of a uniform notification, which is what the mandate then would require, is this letter must, go out. And maybe there's districts or areas that would rather, as we've been talking about, have some funding without going through all these hoops and try to achieve the same, even better outcome of keeping kids in the classroom. So I think that's that's the heart of the issue, I think, that we're trying to get to here. It's not on the fact that we would be considering lessening the focus on it. Is there a better way that we can go about making this do more and be more effective in actually affecting the lives of kids?
Right.
And just to reinforce the point, because it's such an important point, and it probably should have been made much earlier, mandates in K-12 are funded within the Proposition 98 minimum guarantee. It is money you will, by and large, give schools. And the question before you is, how do you want to give it to them? What kinds of strings do you want to attach? It isn't about, will this money not be given? It's that it might not be given for this mandate, but given it's in the guarantee, if you were to choose to fund the guarantee, it's going to go for something. It's just, is this the highest priority? And I probably should have clarified before, too, on a separate note. There were only 2 mandates where the entire work group agreed to eliminate them, and they've already been suspended. They've already been eliminated. That's why the group agreed to it. There were these 4 that are before you today. There was more consensus than on others. There were 2/3 of the folks who said eliminate, under any conditions eliminate, and there were a group of people that said review it to a policy committee or a broader group of folks to discuss. There wasn't anyone in the room who was gung-ho about funding it. And I think that's why you might be starting here, because this was the place where the work group came closest to saying we really think these should be revisited.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
I'm going to have to leave in a minute, too, but I'd just like to elaborate on what Senator Bonilla said, because I also think it's important, because, when I was on school board, and you're so many years behind in getting reimbursed on mandates, and all the work that you have to do, these are important programs, but I think I would rather know exactly what money I'm going to have coming in every year and what I have to spend than what I may receive for mandates that were 5 years old and whether or not they're going to allow 100% of it. And maybe everyone doesn't agree with me, I don't know, but I do think it is worth discussion to say, is there a better way we can fund, and do we have to have a mandate that dictates a specific procedure or policy, or are we better off, allowing you to determine, to give you more flexibility determining those programs? Because, right now with most of these mandates, it's when the state all of a sudden has lots of money, which may not happen for 10 or 15 years, then all of a sudden, you get a big check for mandate reimbursement, but it's something you've been building into your budgets every year anyway.
Okay.
If I may, Madam Chair,
Sure.
just to correct a statement that Jennifer made, and piggybacking actually on Assemblymember Buchanan's comment, from the superintendent's perspective, this is a poor system for any policy, regardless of its merit. And so the consensus that was reached by the working group was that some of the things had policy merit, some had less, some had a great amount of policy merit. There are a few today that we would include amongst those. None of them necessarily belong in the mandate system, certainly not without a constant review to ensure that that's the most effective and efficient way of achieving outcomes. So this, once again, would be a great example of a mandate that should be reviewed for perhaps a more appropriate policy construct and funding construct that would achieve the goals you're looking for.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you. Now, in the audience, is there anyone who would like to address us on the truancy mandates? Come on up and identify yourself, please, and let's limit the comments to about 30 seconds. Unless you really need to speak. So we can go on with panel 3, but go ahead and introduce yourselves and let's get started.
Good afternoon. My name is Shane Silva. I'm here representing the California State PTA. And what I can be very brief. What I want to say about this particular mandate is we absolutely believe that parents need to be involved in this and that they need to be notified. I can speak from personal experience that the robocalls at my house got deleted before I ever got home. And so I do have concern about thinking that somehow a robocall is going to let parents know about what's happening. I don't know that we care to speak about how you fund this, whether it's a mandate or a block grant or whatever, but we do think that parental notification in writing is imperative.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Katie Valenzuela with Public Advocates. And I'll just refer you to the handout we gave you just now. And to be brief, we do feel that truancy is incredibly necessary to be addressed. Clearly, our current system is not enough. If ADA and dropout statistics were sufficient, I believe that our dropout rate would be much lower today. So we do feel that the mandate is critical to uphold, but we agree that the system is inherently broken. So our proposal is very simple, that we do fund the mandates up front, that we fund them at the actual cost of performing those mandates, as we are bound to do by the state constitution, which says that we will pay for what we require. But we do believe that we need a better accountability system, better than this gotcha test-based accountability system that we have right now, that gives us timely expenditure-based data at the school level, where we know where this money is being spent, we know how it's being directed, we know if students are being served before the end of the school year, before they drop out, and before we run out of time to actually address their needs while they're in the school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Chris Reeve on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson. I'm here to speak on, obviously, behalf of the superintendent, to state that the superintendent actually strongly supports this particular mandate, or both of these mandates. And as was previously stated, this mandate is the only thing currently addressing specifically issues around truancy, because we do not currently have anything on the federal books that currently requires or provides funding for districts to do the specific action. We all know that the state's dropout rate is highly unacceptable. We all know that attendance in classrooms across the state is integral to being able to complete a complete high school and your K-12 education, but more importantly, we know that it becomes an indicator in regards to absence or unexcused absences, that is a student who may more likely become a dropout. And I did want to speak to Assemblymember Swanson's question earlier regarding the value or the cost implications regarding this particular issue, and thought it important to really note the report findings from the California Dropout Research Project, which is, as you know, housed at University of California, Santa Barbara, that estimated based on one cohort, one grade level cohort, that the amount of dropouts and the impact it has on the state is that they committed close to 114,000 crimes throughout the state, and the overall cost to the state was just over $24 billion, as stated in this report. And that includes not only the actions of providing for the criminal justice and the criminal justice process, but also incarceration, and of course the issues around victims' costs as well. And so I would also note that there are a disproportional impact on Latino and African American students throughout the state in terms of truancy. And this type of particular mandate provides a crucial benefit to your districts that have a higher disproportional enrollment of certain demographic groups to address their dropout and truancy issues. And so on behalf of the superintendent, I just want to express his interest and his support for this particular mandate. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Kirsten Zazo. I'm the Director of Student Services for Alameda Unified, which is a small school district. I'm also the legislative rep for Casqua. One thing that I've sort of stuck to in listening to this is that everyone keeps talking about the relationship of ADA to getting students in school. And on a macro level, I know that everybody thinks that way, that schools want to get kids in because of the money. And on a micro level, that's kind of the last place that I think people look from living in a school. So for us, good mandates mean that there is a good process for getting kids back into school. And to have this mandate to have schools meet with kids and develop the relationships and teach about the culture of school to parents is really important, because it's a consistent mandate that can go across the state. When I look at ripping this mandate and just saying we don't need to do it because of I agree that the funding needs to change, but the mandate itself lends itself to having consistency about how we talk to parents and students about the culture of school and its importance. Without it, I know that on a school level, schools will not see the same need and process to get those parents into school. And I worry specifically about our underrepresented youth. And without this mandate, what's going to happen to them?
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sheila Lawrence. I'm the Director of Student Support Services in San Leandro. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to address you this afternoon. My colleague, she's right next to me in Alameda, across the water from me in Alameda, and we're also a small district. I'm in charge of the SARB process. I facilitate all the meetings. And what's interesting in listening to the conversation today is I think about how angry parents get when they get that first notification letter. Oh, they're pissed off. They come down to my office. They get on, how dare you send me this letter? I was only a few minutes late, da-da-da. Oh, no. It's just lovely to be able to say, well, ma'am, the state mandates that we and that you as parents do blah, blah, blah. And I'm just here to tell you that I'm extremely concerned that if there are any changes in the mandate, I'm going to have some parents that are going to be real happy. And I like the fact that I can call the district attorney and say, you know what, we need to go forward. We need to go forward with prosecution on this parent. They're neglecting this child. This child deserves to be in school, and this parent is refusing to cooperate. If you can give me something else that's going to give me that kind of power, I'll use it. But right now, this mandate is all I have, and I need to keep it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Bravo, Project Director in the Child Welfare and Attendance Unit of the Los Angeles County Office of Education. In our unit, one of the areas that we cover is on attendance, as Dr. Thompson talked about earlier. I'm going to just kind of reiterate a lot of the points that my colleagues have mentioned and also address some of the issues and concerns that have been brought up by the members and the chairs. The ADA incentive is there, but the funding is really focused on what Ms. Jones stated earlier, which is on direct services to students. And so we talk about how we want to focus on instruction. We want to make sure that we provide a well-rounded instructional program for our students, that we still take away things that are that we thought were supposed to be mandated, like the arts programs. So if the mandate's not there, they're no longer going to be offered to the students due to budgetary constraints. So as such, if this mandate on habitual truancy and on notification of students are removed, then districts may not want to continue to follow the policies and procedures that they have established so far to make sure that students come to school both mentally and physically. And it ensures that these parent conferences are held and find out what are the issues that the parents are going through with their students. Because sometimes parents don't understand that there is an importance of coming to send their students to school. Sometimes they say, you know, it's important for us to go on vacations to be with our families, that it's more important for them to take care of the siblings at home or the elderlies, that they don't compel their students to go to school, or they feel that the schools are supposed to just take care of their kids. So this notification, this letter, does consistently and legally talk about all the reasons why parents need to send their students to school, and these conferences that are held are to make sure that if there are issues that we identify them and also provide them with the services. So I implore you that we continue on with these mandates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beth Helmson with Fight Crime Invest in Kids, representing over 400 sheriffs, police chiefs, and district attorneys. I'd like to reiterate the superintendent's office's comments on crime prevention. Truancy mandates are crime prevention for law enforcement leaders. You know, we look at this and we see that if we can get to these kids early and we can identify these early warnings such as truancy, then we have a better chance of keeping them from dropping out, keeping them out of the juvenile justice system, and keeping them in schools. So we would like to keep these mandates going, and, you know, every day our guys see this on the streets and see kids out of schools and on the streets, and this gives us an early warning system to really intervene at an early stage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob Blattner. Bob Blattner on behalf of the Riverside County Schools Advocacy Association. We are against truants and truancy, but we think that, like the rest of the mandates, this is neither an effective program, as shown by the fact that half of the districts in the state don't even participate. As far as a compliance program, as far as getting a sense of whether this is actually being performed, even the districts that turn in their applications, when they get audited, it's whether or not they dotted the T's and did the things on their application. It's not whether or not they're really taking good care of these kids. We think that this, along with the rest of the mandates, is sort of one of the worst hangovers of the old broken system, which was all about inputs with no interest at all on outcomes. And so we agree completely with some of the sentiments from the members of this committee on not that this isn't a fabulous idea, but there may be a better way to do it more cost efficiently. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other comments, public comments? Okay, let's have our last panel come up, please, to talk about the fiscal performance education mandates. And that is Ellen Gable, Jan Davis, Dr. Chris Medson, and Jennifer Kuhn. Thank you. Okay, Erin, would you like to set the stage?
So for this panel, I'll be talking about two separate mandates. The first mandate is the physical performance testing requirement, which requires schools to administer a test to students in order to determine and measure their physical fitness. The test is performed in 3 grades, and the data is reported and used at the local, district, and state level to track student health and physical fitness. The second mandate, though closely related, is different, and that is the physical education reporting mandate. It requires a limited number of elementary and middle schools to report to the California Department of Education on their compliance with the requirement to provide at least 200 minutes of physical education every 10 days. I'll be talking about these mandates separately because though they are related by subject matter, they really are very different animals, and I think it would be best to keep them separated. They also represent the range of things going on in this mandate discussion as well. It's a good cross-section. So physical performance testing. The statewide physical performance testing, which I'll refer to as the PFT program, was first authorized in 1976. Apparently that was a very big year. It was reestablished in 1995 as part of the California Assessment and Academic Achievement Act by Senator Alpert. And amendments to the program were then enacted in 1998 by the Budget Trailer Bill, and then again in 2002 by Senators Torlakson and Kuehl during the beginning of the childhood obesity epidemic awareness campaign that most recently has been championed by First Lady Michelle Obama. Education Code 60800 establishes the physical fitness testing program as follows. Schools must administer the PFT annually during the months of February through May to all students in grades 5, 7, and 9. Students who are physically unable to take the entire test are to be given as much of the test as the conditions permit. School districts provide students with their individual results after the PFT, either orally or in writing. The California Department of Education collects the physical fitness test results and provides aggregate results to the school districts and to the public. The CDE reports the aggregate results to the governor and to the legislature every 2 years. And the schools must report the summary of their PFT results in their annual School Accountability Report Card, the SARC. The PFT provides information that can be used, one, by the students themselves to assess and plan a personal fitness program, two, by teachers to design the curriculum of their physical education programs, and three, by parents and guardians to understand their children's fitness levels for decision-making in the home. This program also provides results that are used to monitor the changes in aggregate health and physical fitness for all of California's students each year. In February of 1996, the State Board of Education designated the FitnessGram to be the required physical fitness test for school districts in California. The FitnessGram is a comprehensive health-related physical fitness battery that was developed and trademarked by the Cooper Institute. The primary goal of the FitnessGram is to assist students in establishing a lifetime of good habits and regular physical activity. The FitnessGram is composed of 6 areas that I will go over very briefly, and we actually have programmatic experts here from the department if you want to go through any of it in any greater detail. The 6 areas are aerobic capacity, abdominal strength and endurance, upper body strength and endurance, body composition, trunk extensor strength and flexibility, and then basic full body flexibility. The FitnessGram uses objective criteria to evaluate performance in each of these fitness areas, and the Cooper Institute has established these criteria based off of the latest research and expert opinions. These criteria represent a level of fitness that offers some protection based off of research against the diseases that are associated with physical inactivity, which include diabetes, stroke, and heart disease. So with the specific requirements, let's see, the Commission on State Mandates found that Education Code 60800 imposed a reimbursable state mandate to schools. And the Commission found that the following specific activities are reimbursable. 1, acquiring materials and equipment to administer the PFT for students in grades 5, 7, and 10, because I'll just make the note here that this is a physical exam and there are certain types of equipment that are necessary for the teachers to conduct the exam. Training teachers to conduct the PFT, processing and analyzing score data by school personnel other than teachers, and finally responding to the request by CDE to submit the testing results so that we can use it for aggregate purposes. In 2009-10, 322 school districts submitted claims totaling $1.5 million. The legislature at that time actually had started discussing an elimination or suspension of the PFT as part of the other mandate suspension deliberations, and in both years it was ultimately decided to maintain this mandate in place. So the question I wanted to pose to you at this point was, how does this mandate now fit into the principles that we've been discussing earlier? There's 2 issues I wanted to highlight. One is the basic issue of state interest, and then the second is about the funding mechanism itself and the challenges there. First, I wanted to point out that there's absolutely a state interest in judging the accountability function of these mandates. The physical fitness assessment that is required in this mandate is part of our system for holding schools accountable for the curriculum that we require them to provide. The PFT provides objective data that measures the results of school physical education programs, much like our STAR testing program is measuring the results of the work being done in other subject areas. LEAs use the PFT data to modify and improve their programs for students and to help guide their physical education instruction. The results from the PFT assessment provides information to students as well about his or her individual fitness levels. But finally, and I do want to stress this, there's an incredible statewide accountability component that is both state and national in nature for this test. The PFT results are used by organizations and policymakers alike, in addition to LEAs themselves, to make policy decisions regarding children's health and nutrition programs. Data generated from the PFT is used for research and grant purposes and to enhance educational programs for children and youth. Since October of 2007, researchers from a long list of agencies that I have, if you're curious but won't bore you with, have been using and tracking the PFT data annually that's provided by the department. This includes health agencies, universities, researchers, and medical organizations. LEAs use their PFT data also in grant applications to help justify where the obesity epidemic and other health problems might be facing their school district in order to attract additional supportive funds. For example, the following funds were based off of some of these scores: the physical education program, healthy eating and active community programs, and the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the ARA funds. So like any accountability system, it's very important that the data be collected in a consistent manner for all school districts. That's why the superintendent specifically wanted to thank the legislature for not putting this mandate on the suspension list in prior years and for making sure we consider this in a policy context. Consequently, we want to make sure that we understand that this is also not the kind of mandate that we believe if you eliminated the mandate, it would continue to be conducted at the local level, because it is a requirement that takes time and training and investment in every single school. So without the mandate, we do not believe that it would continue to happen. Second, I just wanted to make a point about changing the funding methodology. So separate from the policy merit of this issue, we do believe at the department that there would be a way to restructure this program in order to avoid the administrative burden of the mandate process. For example, we could suggest the legislature considering funding this mandate in such a way as we do as our other assessment programs, which are done in a forward-funded apportionment system. We are actually in the process at the department of drafting that type of suggestion right now for the legislature's consideration during this year's legislative session. And then, as it so happens, completely coincidentally, the state superintendent actually just released this year's fitness program results yesterday. That's what I've passed out to you. And if you'd be interested, I could give you that information, but it's up to the chair.
The bottom line here is?
Bottom line is very similar to the prior year. We have a severe obesity epidemic in our state. Only 31 students statewide posted health scores that were in the health range of acceptability in all 6 areas of the test. In the body composition fitness area, an entire third of our 5th, 7th, and a quarter of our 9th graders are considered to be high risk, which means that they're looking at a lifetime of stronger high risk for heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. And on a brighter note, we're seeing increases in our aerobic capacity targets, with 2/3 of our students meeting the aerobic capacity targets.
Okay.
So the next mandate is the physical education reporting mandate. This one will be a little faster.
Sure.
The PE reporting mandate is based on Education Code Section 51210.1, which was passed in 1997 by Assemblymember Martinez and then was amended in 2002 by then Assemblymember Bington. The section directs selected districts to report district compliance with another requirement in the Ed Code that school districts provide a minimum of 200 minutes of physical education over a 10-day period for grades 1 through 8. This is a different requirement than what is in place for high schools. Just by way of background, the California Department of Education does monitor compliance with a variety of program requirements in the Ed Code through a system of reviews locally and desk audits of school districts. This system, because it is primarily a review of federally mandated programs, is called the Federal Program Monitoring. However, the requirement around PE is also covered during that same review. With respect to this mandate, it specifically requires the superintendent to select a sample of school districts for reporting on the 200-minute requirement, and also it also specifically asks us to do it in conjunction with our regular reviews. The CDE implements this section by selecting a sample of districts that are being reviewed in their regular 4-year cycle for other programs, and by asking them to submit already available documentation to prove that they're meeting these requirements, such as a Bell schedule or instructional schedule. We also use the physical fitness test that I referred to in the prior mandate as a way of targeting schools that might, as a red flag for those who might have problems in meeting the 200-minute mandate or who may have problems meeting other requirements around high-quality physical education programs. I just also wanted to note that one of the items monitored while we're there as well is a requirement that they post their physical fitness test results on their school accountability report card, another requirement. The Commission on State Mandates determined that a mandate exists because of this section of code. Specifically, the activities eligible for reimbursement are preparing and submitting reports to the state superintendent, developing and implementing training for school district staff on the reporting requirements, developing and implementing record keeping and audit procedures necessary to comply with the recording requirements, developing and submitting a plan of correction for the department as requested within 1 year of receiving a non-compliance notification from the department. In 2009 and 10, 4 school districts submitted claims across the state, claiming a total of $10,552. It is likely that claiming is limited because only a sample of districts are required to report, as we do a sample every 4 years, and the reporting is currently right now including the submitting of already on-hand reports at the local level. This mandate was suspended in 2010-11 and again for 2011-2012. The department believes that, unlike the other mandates we've been reviewing here today, this is an absolutely excellent example as to why mandates need to be reviewed on a regular basis, just to make sure that they make any sense whatsoever. We believe that activities required under this mandate may actually already be authorized under other areas of the Education Code, which authorizes broader oversight for the California Department of Education in enforcing compliance with physical education requirements. For example, we don't have a specific requirement around monitoring the minutes for high schools in this mandate. However, we do that as part of our compliance, and we believe we have the authority to do so. We're currently conducting a legal review internally of this question, and we will be prepared to provide language to the legislature this year on how we would recommend perhaps striking this mandate if it is legally completely verifiable that it would have no impact on conducting these reviews.
Thank you. Ms. Kuhn, you want to respond with the working group recommendations?
So maybe just 1 minute on each. So starting with the PE reports, because there was more agreement that there was limited justification for it. It has already been suspended. I think the thinking was, as Erin indicated, there are tools for ensuring that physical education instruction is occurring, and that this particular mandate, especially with only 4 districts reporting, is again not about the instruction, more entirely about the report. Right. And that, again, in an environment where the state was making difficult choices, this priority, the state could live without the report, particularly if via auditing they can ensure that the instruction was still occurring. So on the testing, there was, again, just agreement that it should be reviewed. There was an agreement on a specific treatment. I do think, again, this gets to the priorities. The state can have physical education standards as well as health standards. It can have requirements on minimum minutes of instruction, this 200 minutes every 2 weeks. Those are not mandates. What the state is paying for here is the FitnessGram, is this particular test. And what we as the LAO would suggest is in this environment, that probably doesn't rise to the highest priority. For example, the state is not providing instructional materials money for reading and math today. It's not providing the art and music block grant. It's not providing the PE block grant. These are hundreds of millions of dollars where the state has decided not to have strings attached. So then to have a particular testing requirement, given, again, the scheme of trade-offs, not that in an ideal world this might not be a valuable thing to do, but given the other things that you might want to do with this dollar in the short term, you might, again, decide to prioritize differently moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Let's do Ms. Davis, Director of Secondary Programs at LA Unified.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Jan Davis, and I am the Director of Secondary, or Administrative Coordinator for Secondary Programs for LA Unified School District, and that I oversee a number of programs, one being PE, but I also oversee the WASC accreditation process, alternative education, and a number of other activities. But my background, prior to being in a downtown office, I was a physical education teacher in LA Unified. I have 26 years of experience with LA Unified. I was also a site administrator in the role of an assistant principal of a large high school in LA Unified, and also a principal of a large high school in LA Unified. So I kind of have seen the fitnessgram from both ends, and from longevity in terms of when we didn't have it when I was a PE teacher to now that we do have it. And so I'm here today to support. I think the mandate should stay in place because I think the program and the data really informs our community and it informs our teachers of how their best practices, and if maybe the scores aren't as what they should be, how they could improve those. It also, as a local district, provides opportunities to assess our students in fitness, which again, when I first started teaching, we didn't really have anything. I did it my own way in my classroom, but my colleague in the next classroom was probably doing it a different way. So I think this has standardized the physical assessment of students. It has helped in LA Unified to really structure the physical education programs K through 12. Because we've focused on the fitnessgram because we want our scores to go up. That has really been a thrust of what we've been doing with professional development. But in terms of like the program administration, we test over 150,000 students every year. Now we have approximately 660,000 students in the school district, but when we test the 5th, 7th, and 9th graders, it's about 150,000 students. The test is given in their physical education class by their physical education teacher. My office provides training and professional development in terms of how that test should be administered in a thoughtful, good practice that should be taking place. The student accounting and assessment unit for LA Unified provides a packet for the schools so that they can score the results, and then they submit them back to them. They then send it to an outside vendor to put the package together or to review all the results, and then what comes back to us is a district-wide result, what each school has done, and then there's obviously a student report. The student gets a report, and a report goes into their cumulative file. And then that vendor also, for kids who meets the healthy fitness zone, they also get a certificate. Now that cost to LA Unified is $79,000. So it's only about 52 cents a student to do that paperwork, and it's really only because we do use an outside vendor. It's only about 20 hours of LA Unified personnel to compile all this data. As everybody else, we've had cuts in all of our units, so but it's only taken about 20 hours of their time to compile this data. In terms of policy development and implication for us, when we had the fitnessgram with SB 601 in 2007, that's about the exemption for the last 2 years of PE in high school. We now have that if a student in 9th grade does not pass the fitnessgram, they are not exempt from the last 2 years of high school PE. They need to stay in there until they pass the fitnessgram, meaning that kids take PE in 9th grade. Then they have to take a second year of PE either in 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. If they do not pass the fitnessgram in 9th grade, they must take PE again in 10th grade. And then they're giving the exam, a portion of the exam they didn't pass. They are given that repeatedly till they pass it. Hopefully then all kids will be done with it or pass it by 10th grade. However, if students do not pass it by 10th grade, they need to stay in some type of PE class and continually be tested until they pass that fitnessgram. Now, we have noticed over the last 5 years that with the emphasis on the fitnessgram and the new PE standards, that over the last 5 years, that our pass rate for students has gone up from 27% to 57%. And then with our Latino population, it's gone from 25% up to 54% passing. And for the African American population, it has improved from 28% to 56%. So I think with that emphasis, because it's a mandate, a state mandate, the emphasis is really there for school communities to do well. In terms of planning and professional development, we use the fitness scores to evaluate our programs, our physical education programs in our schools, just like we use the CST scores for math and English and the other core subjects. It also, the information that the PE teachers gain from this data, that drives their instruction. They then look at what they're doing in their physical education classes. Not that they're testing the PE, the fitnessgram all year long, but if they see a lot of their kids are maybe not able to have aerobic capacity, they might do more aerobic exercises or activities in their classrooms. If they're seeing that kids don't have upper body strength, they're going to incorporate that into their classes more. So they do use it to inform their instruction in their classes. Also, the site administrators, it gives the principal or the local districts a way to assess, is that physical education program doing the best they can for students. As stated earlier, it is in the accountability report, school accountability report. It also goes into, LA Unified has their own report card called My Data that all parents have access to. The fitness scores, the fitnessgram scores are included in that, so parents can look at what schools are doing better, maybe on their fitnessgram, but we feel it's an important high-stakes test that should be included in any accountability that we share with parents. Many stakeholders in education and different health organizations also are using this result to work with our students to improve their health and to overcome the childhood obesity epidemic. The data also has helped, especially LA Unified, in terms of getting grants. Over the last 10 years, we've gotten over $13 million in grants, and it's based on our fitnessgram data. A lot of it, we have to include that data in it, showing that we need extra assistance. And now that we've been improving, that has helped us get some grants just because we are now showing improvement in our students. This year, LA Unified, in partnership with the Los Angeles County Health Department, has been awarded a $50 million community transformation grant with the PFT scores demonstrating the physical activity needs of our students. This grant from the Health and Human Services Department will provide LA Unified with $350,000 per year for 5 years for its physical education needs. Again, for improving physical education instruction in the classroom and for assistance on the tests. In addition, we have Sound Body, Sound Mind grants that our middle schools can get, and they get $50,000 to put fitness centers into their schools based on what they need in terms of their fitnessgram scores. And Aaron talked about the results that just came out, that we're, in LA Unified, we know that 45% of our fifth graders from the spring of 2011 measured at high risk in body composition measures. And that's a concern for us in LA Unified for our youngest, the fifth graders, the youngest kids that are getting this exam. So we want to make sure that we still have that tool of the fitnessgram to continue to assess the students of LA Unified. And I think the fact that it's a mandate, it just makes it more high stakes, and it really proves to the school communities that this is an important part of education. As a physical education teacher, that was my first profession, kids aren't getting enough physical activity. Sometimes physical education, as with the arts, are not as seen maybe as important as math, science, English, and social studies. But if our kids aren't healthy and they don't learn lifelong activities that will keep them healthy once they graduate from high school, it just hurts society at large. So as part of LA Unified, we really feel the mandates should stay as is.
Thank you very much. Okay, and our last presenter is Dr. Chris Medsum from UCSF.
Thank you. Good
Welcome.
afternoon. I'm a pediatrician, and my clinical work is in our obesity clinic at UCSF, and then the other 75% of my time I spend doing research. So unfortunately, in my clinical role, I diagnose at least one teenager every month with either prediabetes or diabetes. And my research is aimed at trying to reduce obesity and to address health disparities, because in obesity, as in other chronic diseases, we see a lot of disparities in health by race and by income. So I'm just going to make 3 quick points. One is how we've used the PFT data in research, not just me personally, but many of my colleagues. Second, how research and the data themselves really do influence child health. And then lastly, why I'm concerned that if the mandate were to go away, we would actually see an increase in health disparities. So first, how the PFT data are used in research. I think you may even have in your packets a paper that came out last year. It was in the Sacramento Bee, it was in the San Francisco Chronicle, and it was the PFT data that we had used to examine trends in obesity over time in California. So we had data, we had over 7 million data records from California's youth in 5th, 7th, and 9th grade from 2001 to 2008. And what we did was we tracked trends in obesity. So we looked at kids who, for those of you who know body mass index, it's height divided by, or weight divided by height. And you can classify a kid as being at risk, either being overweight or obese. And we saw in California, and this was actually great news, and it was the first time this was ever published, there was a beginning decline in the obesity epidemic. So we saw a peak in obesity rates in California in 2005, and then a decline to 2008. That was great news. It still meant that we had 38% of kids who were overweight or obese compared to only 35% nationally at that time. The concern that we had was that there were differences in those trends for kids of different race ethnic groups. So while white and Asian youth only had about 28% of kids who were overweight or obese, Latino youth, there were 47% of Latino youth who were overweight or obese, and 39% of African American youth. This data set, just having the ability to look at these data was incredible, and I will tell you that it is the most comprehensive, objective database on the fitness of youth in the nation. There is no other data set like it. And it means that we actually know something about the health of all the kids in California schools. It's particularly interesting because it's one of the few databases that gives us data on Asian youth and Pacific Islander youth, because few data sets or few regions of the country have sufficient numbers of different populations to actually track that. Other colleagues have used the same data, but on the fitness side, looking at aerobic capacity, and have demonstrated really strong links between kids having greater fitness and kids doing better in school. So we know that academics are linked to fitness and to physical activity, and in part those data come from California's fitness test data. So without the mandate, while districts would continue potentially to do this, we wouldn't have a central repository. So this is not about disparities, but just if the data weren't all collected centrally, we would not be able to access it the way that we do now for research purposes. So the second piece is how the research, so I'm excited about research because I'm kind of a nerd, but why does anybody else really care about research? And the truth is that the research are incredibly provocative sometimes and very compelling. So when communities see data that demonstrate that they're not doing as well in obesity as their neighbors, it's compelling, and it can change policies in schools, and it can change policies in districts. And LA Unified was one of the first districts to actually adopt new nutrition standards in an attempt to actually curb obesity rates. And they used data from the fitness test to track over time the results. I have locally, we're actually infusing over $500,000 into 7 schools in Contra Costa and West Contra Costa, a very high needs area, in Richmond and San Pablo, through a study that's funded by the American Dietetic Association. And we used the PFT data to determine which were the highest needs schools, so where should we go in to do this study in order to be sure that we're reaching the kids who need it most. And then I'll close just to keep it brief by talking about why I think my big concern about stopping the mandate and health disparities. So if it's not a mandate and it is left up to schools, there's no question that some schools will continue to do it. But I can tell you that every study I've ever done, when I look at what predicts who's going to continue, it all has to do with resources. And so I will guarantee you that it is the under-resourced schools with the highest needs kids that will be most likely to drop the test. And what will happen is we won't have data then on which are the kids that need our interventions the most, and we won't know where to target our interventions. So I would urge you to consider making sure that somehow kids continue to get this important test.
Okay. Thank you very much.
If I could just make one comment, that if you were to choose to keep this test, I think I'm correct in that this is the only test the state funds via the mandate process. All of the other tests it funds as a line item in the Annual Budget Act. The state provides so much for the English learners exams, for the California Standards exams, for the CASE. You could use the same approach here.
Right. Thank you.
When we look at the claim sheet, out of 1,000 districts, 333 are claiming. Is your data based on all 1,000 districts?
Yeah, our data where we limited this particular study. Actually, this wasn't limited to K-8, K-12. We've done multiple studies, and sometimes we limit it, but we had data on, as of 2008, 95% of the districts submitted data on PFT. So it's interesting that few claim it, because I know that the data are very complete.
So here's the dilemma. Less than a third are following through and handling it like a mandate. Because when we call it a mandate, it triggers this entire kind of dysfunctional process of getting reimbursed and all of this. And 333 are the only ones that are bothering. So, is it the reimbursement that is driving the behavior? No. Clearly not. Clearly you have 95% who are still doing it. And they're not even putting in the paperwork because the system is so broken.
Right.
Yes, but I mean, that's what we're trying to get to here is, what's driving the behavior? Is it just that we put that word on it? We call it a mandate? But we've heard people, we've got to have the funding. But this shows that it isn't about them getting the money.
Right.
There's something else at work here, and they're still doing it.
Is it because I know that it actually increased from about 72% in 2001 to 95%, where we had data on districts over time from 2001 to 2008. And I clearly I'm not an expert at all in mandates, but I just wonder if the fact that they have to report those data to the district makes it a slightly different mandate from other mandates where there's no place at which it's known whether or not they've done it. For all districts, I know that there are audits that randomly sample districts, but in this case, whether or not the district did it.
Just piggybacking on that, the power of the mandate here is twofold. There's the power of the mandate itself, the requirement, which then in this place, in the case of the FitnessGram, allows the department to require compliance with the submission of data, which of course requires them to have administered it so they can have data to send to us. And then there's the incentive of the dollars. And so what you find is the power here is more in the mandate itself. School districts have to comply. There's an outcome they have to provide to the department in the form of data, and so therefore they do it, though the mandate system disincentivizes most of them from claiming the cost that they are all incurring. It demonstrates the power of the mandate and the disadvantage we're putting districts at because of the fact that we continue to fund it through the mandate system. Mm-hmm. But it also puts the state in an interesting position because you have to ask yourself whether or not the price tag to administer this program might go up. if you were actually to equally give funds to every school district based off of what their approximate cost is right now. You have to assume that every school district is incurring costs around the FitnessGram, particularly in the realm of professional development for those teachers who are administering the test. And so because of that, there's a question here about how there's the question about what's the best policy for administering the FitnessGram, but then there's also a question of, particularly in this horrible economic and climate, are you able to shift to a better construct, or would that actually be more expensive?
Well, pretty much everything seems to be more expensive, but I mean, the point you're making there is that, just for the sake of discussion, and you made it earlier at the very beginning. It's a very good point, and it's the issue of accountability. And so, for instance, with truancy, we should be requiring school districts with this mandate to reduce their truancy rates, and see what happens, because that's the bottom line that's kind of been exposed with the discussion today, is that if it's really that valuable and really that important, and we care about kids this much, we've got to care about the outcome as much as the front end, where we say it's a good idea. But we've got to have the accountability piece on it. Now, obviously, the system of the reimbursement is tremendously malfunctioning for districts, and really to the detriment of school districts and children as well. And that's got to be fixed as well. So it's been a very interesting, really interesting discussion today.
If I could, I think too, we have to make sure that if it's not a mandate or something like that, that some districts might not do it. They might do it for a while. They might continue it for a while, but then they'll find something else maybe to do with whatever the limited funds that they have. And again, I've seen PE, like the arts and all the extra kind of things that people think of as not the four core areas, especially at the secondary level, kind of get pushed to the wayside. And I would hate to see that happen, because PE now has kind of come to the front of the line again, saying because it's such because of the childhood obesity, and we want everyone to be healthy and active. But if we don't do it statewide, again, some districts will continue to do it, other districts might not.
I apologize. I didn't come prepared with the exact date on this, so I'll find it for you because it just occurred to me. But a wonderful example of how this has already happened in California is with the California Healthy Kids Survey, which I know many of you are very familiar with. We actually were able to administer it based off of a federal mandate in every school in California for many years, and we got an incredible set of data that was just exceptionally valuable, both the local and the state level, to understand all kinds of trends around children's safety, their attitudes, their exposure to all kinds of issues. The federal mandate went away starting, I believe, with this school year, including the funding stream for those tests. And while it was administered religiously at every school district across the state when the federal mandate and the federal funding was in place, we saw a reduction in just the first year by over 25%. Of what school districts were administering it. And now, while our program staff are celebrating, hey, like 70-something% still complied, that's just in the first year alone. Imagine next year, under hard times, when more and more school districts realize it's not required, they're not getting dollars for it. And despite it being a wonderful tool that gives us exceptional power in making policy decisions, the impact it will have in the long run.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. This is time for public comment. There's a little lineup, so please join us up here. Okay. Oh, all right. I didn't realize that microphone was on. If there's a lot of dittos out there, you can just make it really fast. Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Rito Guerin. I'm the State Director for Mission Readiness, a national nonprofit organization of more than 250 retired admirals and generals that advocate for smart investments in our nation's youth in order to reduce barriers to enlistment and thereby strengthen military preparedness. I want to thank the committee for providing us this opportunity to give our perspective on the importance of the PFT and PE reporting to our state and our national security. And I hope you'll indulge me a few minutes so I can provide a comprehensive picture for you. For many of us, when we think of the military, we think of large ships, fast jets, and smart weapons. However, I can tell you that the real secret weapon in our arsenal is our people. We constantly assess these individuals to ensure that they are meeting the physical and technical standards so that they will be able to complete those tasks that will allow them to accomplish any mission that they are given. The information derived from this assessment process is critical to the operation of our military so that we understand where we are on the spectrum of operational readiness. Furthermore, by assessing specific activities, we promote that the activity is important and a priority. The data derived from the fitnessgram and the PE compliance report is just as critical to the state of California so that we may combat the childhood obesity crisis. We need to know how many children are physically fit within a healthy BMI index and are receiving the required PE minutes because unfit young adults are a threat to our national security. A recent study done for the Department of Defense presented a sobering statistic that roughly 75% of 17 to 24-year-olds are unable to join the military, largely because of three factors. One, they do not have a high school diploma. Two, they have a serious criminal record. Or three, they are physically unfit. Being overweight or obese, in fact, is the leading medical reason why young adults cannot join the military. Mission Readiness recently released a report utilizing fitnessgram data that showed 1/3 of ninth graders in the state had poor aerobic capacity. 23% of ninth graders had poor upper body strength, and 1 in 4 young adults is too heavy to join the military. Being physically active and maintaining a healthy weight can also help reduce injuries. Recently, military officials sounded the alarm by announcing that the growing population of soldiers unfit for duty is starting to affect our military readiness. Today's recruits have the highest body mass indices ever recorded. Unfit recruits, even if they are not overweight, suffer far higher rates of sprains and stress fractures because they have not developed the stronger muscles that act as shock absorbers. The surprising fact is that today's soldiers are much more likely to be evacuated out of Iraq and Afghanistan for a serious sprain or stress fracture than for a combat wound. These types of injuries cause a quarter of all medical evacuations out of theater. To ensure our students are physically fit, we need to make informed choices on where to devote resources and develop research-based strategies and interventions that will be most effective for each stage of development for children, young adults, and gender. In addition, we need to provide parents with information to make informed choices. As former military leaders, our members know how critical physical activity is for developing able-bodied citizens who are able to serve their country if they so choose. Therefore, it is important that we do not overlook investments that are crucial to our nation's long-term health and security. The fitnessgram physical performance test and understanding how many of our children are receiving the required PE minutes will help to prevent the cost of widespread obesity in our children and support our national security over the long term. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alicia Sanchez with the California Center for Public Health Advocacy. We're a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that has focused our work on raising awareness of the public health issues surrounding the childhood obesity epidemic and is one of the organizations that has used the PFT data in our research. I think you've heard a very compelling case for the value of this PFT data, and I think would like to just point out that I think that the testimony today has really shown how the PFT does meet the LAO's criteria for maintaining a mandate, which is the state will encounter significant health or safety risks, and I would point out after my colleagues from Mission Readiness, national health risks as well and safety risks, as well as that the educational system will not function with nearly the same effectiveness or integrity, and would just like to kind of put a finer point on the larger perspective, which is that California spends more public and private money on the health consequences of obesity than any other state in the country, and the costs, including lost productivity to families, employers, the healthcare industry, and government, totals more than $21 billion each year. So this has extreme consequences for the state as well as for our students who, as was mentioned by Dr. Madsen, have higher educational proficiency when their academic performance when they are physically fit. And this data allows us to hone our interventions to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Brendan Tuig on behalf of the American Heart Association. I just want to make a few brief points. overweight kids have a 70 to 80% chance of staying overweight as adults, or their whole lives, in fact. And also among children today, obesity is causing a broad range of health problems that previously weren't seen until adulthood. Among them are included high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and also elevated blood cholesterol levels. And so what all this means is it's higher and earlier death rates in adulthoods. And in fact, this generation of children may have a shorter lifespan than that of their parents. It also means higher state health-related costs, higher lost productivity work costs, higher workers' compensation costs. Members, also what we've heard today, too, is that data from the FitnessGram is actually bringing money into the state. So I would argue that the FitnessGram mandate is a budget deficit solution. Combating childhood obesity epidemic is a budget solution, and we urge you to retain this important public health mandate. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Pamela Gibbs, representing the Los Angeles County Office of Education. I don't want to repeat a lot of the comments already made, especially from the LEAs who testified earlier today. We do recognize this is a low-cost mandate, as you heard in testimony today, and we also know that, as Brendan stated, the mandate has the ability, with the data captured in the FitnessGram, to draw funding into the state. To the extent that you see it necessary to make changes to how the mandate is funded, we want to make sure that you preserve the ability for us to draw down ERA-type funding or other funds that this data would help us in applying for in the future. We know that this fitness issue has been a priority of the federal administration, so we would want to consider that we contain any parts of the mandate that would allow us to apply for those funds.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob Blattner, again on behalf of the Riverside County Soups. We're also in favor of physical fitness. We think that this mandate, though, really highlights many of the inequities and problems with the entire system. As Jennifer said, these dollars are taken from the Prop 98 pot right off the top before anyone gets a dime of them. They come off the top when they are spent. But let's look who got, 95% of the people did it, right? When you mandate it, they're going to do it. Let's look a little bit at the claiming. Over the 5 years for which the controller has the most recent data, fewer than 200 districts claimed every year.
Right.
More than 500 districts did not claim once. And so to the extent that this is a high priority or maybe a high priority goal, I think that we would like to see it as the superintendent for public instruction has said, let's treat it like we do important assessment issues. The mandate system is broken. Let's be honest about what we care about and take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Monique Ramos here on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Instruction Tom Torlakson. California has an obesity epidemic in which more than 1/3 of children are obese or overweight. 69% of California students who took the 2011 FitnessGram classified as need improvement or are in high risk, meaning they are overweight or obese. The superintendent strongly supports continuing the physical fitness test mandate because this is the only way where we are going to be able to track the health epidemic we have and provide state and local accountability for physical education programs. We know schools use this data. Furthermore, the PFT is the only ongoing objective, comprehensive source of student health-related fitness data collected statewide with disaggregated data available to county, districts, and at the school level. With the necessary national focus on childhood obesity, the PFT annual report is a critical source of information for Californians about the health and fitness of our children. Healthy, fit children cut Medi-Cal costs to the state. Healthy, fit children improve school attendance and school funding. Healthy, fit children improve student achievement and school performance. LEAs use the PFT data to modify and improve programs for students. They use the professional development program to assist administrators and teachers, as well as analyze students' needs and programs to modify the program to enhance curriculum and instruction for students. Thank you.
Thank you. For those of you who have written presentations. Would you just leave them with the sergeants so that we can include them in our notes? Thank you.
Certainly. Good evening. Katie Valenzuela on behalf of Public Advocates. And to be very brief, without assessments in this budget climate, standards are not taken seriously. We know that districts are strapped and they have to focus on where they're being held accountable. And similarly, these reporting requirements are essential for that two-way accountability I was talking about. And I'll note, back in 2006, that the California Center for Public Health Advocacy actually found that 51% of districts in California weren't adhering to the standards for physical education. They weren't giving students what the state law said they needed to give them. So these mandates are clearly necessary, and we understand that there is a funding issue, but there's also an accountability issue. And while we certainly should address this funding issue up front, give all the money to everybody who is serving these students, not addressing the accountability at the same time will not solve the problems we are looking at today. We're still going to be giving schools money for things that we do not know are happening on the ground. So if we're going to be truly looking at reforming the mandates, making our system meaningful for the students who need it, who we all agree need it, who we all agree need these things in particular, we need to reform our accountability system to make it meaningful, make it timely, and make it transparent enough to where we really know that students are getting the education they're guaranteed in our laws. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Kathy Lynch, representing the California Association for Physical Education, Health, Recreation, and Dance. This is where the educators that provide the testing, as well as the health teachers that deal in the aftermath of all this. And I think much has been said today. I think you've had some excellent, compelling testimony. We've provided a lot of materials for your packets that you have. But I would also just like to encourage you to think about the other policy areas we didn't discuss today in the nutrition area and in other health areas, whether we're in the health committee, in the insurance committee, or the education committee. A lot of the decisions that we've made in the California legislature have been wrapped around these test results. And if there's something that's going to change about this process, I think it's very important that we look at all of those components as well, because we'll be self-defeating in the good policy work that California has been leading the nation on as it relates to the obesity epidemic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Matthew Marson with the Public Health Institute, and I'm here in strong support of the Fitness Gram mandate. I just want to echo the comments of my colleagues and also the comments of the panel. I do want to provide a very specific example. We were a partner with the state of California earlier this year on applying for the community transformation grants for the rest of state, that's the small and the rural counties, and we were successful in securing the 5-year award for $6 million for the first year, and then ongoing award for the 5 years. And the Fitness Gram data was really critical in making sure that we could secure that funding. It really gave us a picture of what was happening in these rural counties and in the schools. And it will also be critical data as we actually evaluate the success of the initiatives that we're implementing in these communities. And so maintaining this data source over the years to come will be critical. The Senate in Congress just approved, although we don't know if the dollars will be finalized yet, but additional funding for community transformation grants. California needs to be competitive to secure those federal dollars in the year to come. And the Fitness Gram data is just one critical piece of that, and it's one that needs to be protected. So we urge you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shane Silva, California State PTA, and I do want to speak in support of the Fitness Gram. The obesity epidemic in children is really critical in this state and across the nation. And you asked earlier about why are people doing this if they're not asking for reimbursement. I've sat through enough school district budget meetings to know that if it's required, it gets done, and if it's not required, it doesn't get done. And so whether you call it a mandate or something else, it does need to happen for the children of California.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Ms. Bonilla, this is Rand Martin on behalf of the California Charter Schools Association. My comments are actually relevant to panel one, so I hope this is an appropriate time to bring up these comments. Charter schools now serve about 7% of public school students across California. We added a net increase of 70 schools this past year. It's obviously growing exponentially from year to year. All charter schools, despite the fact that we're free from most education code requirements, do have mandates that they have to meet by statute. Some of them are the same mandates that other schools have to meet, like the School Accountability Report Card. Some are mandates that are similar to mandates that are imposed on traditional public schools. But we are not reimbursed for any of those mandates. And that's based on a decision from the Commission on State Mandates in 2006 that says that we are voluntary entities and by virtue of that are not eligible for mandate reimbursement. Of course, we find that argument and have made this argument back to them, though they have not agreed with us. We find that argument irrelevant because if you look at cities that incorporate, especially in recent years, here in Sacramento County, we've seen Elk Grove and Citrus Heights incorporate. Those are voluntary movements on the part of the citizens there, just like parents and community leaders putting together charter schools are voluntary. But local governments, local cities do get reimbursed for their mandates even though they volunteer to do it. Charter schools already, as Ms. Bonilla, I'm sure knows because of testimony before the Budget Subcommittee, already receive less money than traditional public schools. Our ADA is lower typically than a traditional public school. Many of our schools do not receive the same kind of facility funding that traditional schools do, and that money has to come out of the classroom. Unfortunately, when we have to meet these mandates, we also take the money out of the classroom to pay for these mandates as well. So what we're seeking is, in whatever the legislature ultimately decides as a result of this hearing and the subsequent hearings you're going to have, is that we be treated equally along with other traditional public schools. And where there are mandates statutorily for charter schools, that we be eligible for mandate reimbursement as well. In closing, I just want to make one point. I was struck by a comment that Ms. Gable made, and Ms. Bonilla, you echoed this in your last comments, about how some LEAs will not pursue a mandate because there's no enforcement mechanism. And you talk about the lack of accountability. We may pay for it, but we're not sure that we're getting what we want. The difference with charter schools is we are held accountable because all of our mandates are within the petition process. And if the school district doesn't think that we're meeting the mandates, then we can be revoked. That's a pretty heavy-duty hammer, and we don't get reimbursed for that. So with those comments, I would like to encourage that consideration as this process moves forward, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank Chair Bonilla and all the staff that put these panels together. I want to thank the participants. And if there's no other public comment or otherwise, we have lots of things to consider. And this is the beginning of a conversation, I hope a constructive one, that we will continue to look at some of these mandates that we've been embraced with, I guess. Thank you very much for participating. Meeting adjourned.